The Dead Space remake is the definitive way to experience Dead Space. That's it. Leave a comment below, like, and subscribe. No, but seriously, let's talk about it really quick. I absolutely loved the original Dead Space. The fact that it took place in space, the fact that the controls reminded me of Resident Evil 4 but smoother, the fact that you had to dismember the necromorphs to kill them, the fact that it was an actually good, scary game at a time where we didn't have many new ones releasing. The original Dead Space was one of the few games that actually made me nervous while I played, something I hadn't really experienced since the first few Resident Evil and Silent Hill games. I was so excited when I heard that they were making a remake, and it was definitely going to be a day one purchase for me. But honestly, I wasn't expecting much going in. I mean, Dead Space didn't really need a remake in my opinion. It holds up extremely well. For instance, when I heard about the Dead Space remake, I'm just going to call it DSR for short from now on, I went back and played the original to grab the last few achievements that I needed to complete it. And everything holds up exceptionally well. The graphics still look great, dated a bit, but great. The controls were still smooth and solid, and it's still a very tense and scary game. I wasn't sure what they could do to improve upon it outside of the visuals that would really necessitate a remake. Let's talk a bit about how my mind was slowly changed. So this may sound a little weird, but hear me out really quick. DSR reminds me a lot of the Resident Evil 1 remake, the one that originally came out on the GameCube. Now, it's not nearly as drastic of a change as that game, but it has the same feel to it to me for some reason. And for those who have never played Resident Evil 1 or its remake, just know that this is a huge compliment I'm giving to DSR here. The way the game plays mostly the same as the original and follows the same basic outline but adds new layers to it, like more locations, new gameplay features, and a deeper understanding for the story. That's what DSR does to the original Dead Space. Let's talk about the changes between DSR and the original Dead Space for a second. The graphics are an obvious improvement. I'll show some side-by-side footage of DSR and the original so you can compare for yourself. I mean, you can clearly see how great DSR looks. The textures are much better. The lighting and shadows here are nothing short of amazing. There was a moment pretty early on where some moving machinery cast some light on a wall in front of me, and it made me jump because I thought a necromorph was sneaking up behind me about to tear my head off. There are a ton of moments like this throughout the game, and even being a veteran of the original, I'm not ashamed to admit that this game managed to scare the shit out of me more than a few times. A couple of other obvious changes are Isaac's face, which, let's be honest, isn't a huge deal because you can barely see it throughout the game anyway. And it fits his voice perfectly. And yes, Isaac talks now.
Not a job you turned down, but 6 months apart with only vid calls. It's rough. Easy to say the wrong.
I know some people thought that this would hurt the tone of the game, but I disagree. Just because he talks doesn't mean he's a chatty Cathy. He's actually pretty soft-spoken. It just gives more life to Isaac as a character. Now he feels like more part of a team that's trying to get off the ship alive instead of a tool that the other characters use. It also helps the story develop much more naturally. There are some changes to the story here as well. Nothing that changes the main beats necessarily. You're still playing the same chapters and doing mostly the same things. However, they added some new characters and added more depth to the existing ones. The most notable to me being Mercer. I don't want to spoil anything, but they did a great job with him here. Daniels and Hammond still bicker and fight, but just not as intense as before. The best way I can describe it is that they are less hostile towards each other this time around. I do think they could have done more with the relationship between Isaac and Nicole, but that's more of a nitpick for me, and what's here is really good. The gameplay in DSR mostly plays the same. You are still shooting off the limbs of necromorphs and stomping them out, and it all feels really great. There are some differences to some of the guns, but if I'm being honest, outside of getting the 30 kills with each gun for the achievements, I'm still Plasma Cutter main all the way. I do want to give a special shout out to the Force Gun though, because blasting off all of the skin of a necromorph in one shot and then watching it get back up and stalk towards you is one of the best gaming experiences of all time, and you should definitely experience it at least once. Upgrading your suit and guns is mostly the same as well. You go to a bench and use nodes to upgrade them. In the original, there used to be some empty slots that you had to use to actually get to an upgrade slot. However, now there are no empty slots, so every node is an improvement. A couple of the more drastic changes are the god-awful turret sections in the original are now replaced with much cooler sections where you are manually linking up to the turrets and free aiming and shooting. It is so much better here. Also, the zero gravity sections have been overhauled. In the original, you basically just stood there, aimed at a suitable spot to land, hit a button, and Isaac would float over to it. But in DSR, you can just lift off and fly. Basically, Isaac is Iron Man. You have full control in these areas. You do still fight enemies in 0G, and it can be a bit annoying trying to find where those stupid 3-tentacle babies are shooting you from, but it's one of the few annoying things about the game. Let's talk about some of the entirely new features in DSR. One really cool one that comes to mind is where you will come to these junction boxes and you need to reroute the power. Different boxes have different options, such as elevators, doors, lights, or oxygen, and you can only have so many active at a time. What this means is sometimes you will need to make a decision. Now, you need power going to one of the doors or the elevators to progress, so do you leave the lights on but have to rush through it so you don't run out of air? Or take as much time as you need but in complete darkness? These moments are great, but sadly they are very few and far between. There are also side quests now. Not many, but a few, and I highly recommend doing them. Not only do you get some cool items, you also get some interesting story bits as well. There is also this security clearance mechanic in the game. Basically, certain doors, lockers, and boxes are locked behind a certain level of clearance. And as you progress through the chapters, you will start gaining access to a higher and higher clearance. It's a really cool feature that incentivizes you to backtrack and open doors that you couldn't before. Speaking of which, I want to talk about my absolute favorite change in DSR. The Ishimura,
The USG Ishimura,
is now a fully backtrackable and explorable map. The game still follows chapters, however now they are seamless. Instead of each chapter ending and beginning by using the tram, now it just happens as you are walking from one section to another. You can still use the tram to travel faster and safer, but now, for the most part, you can travel from one section to the next on foot, and at any point, you can freely backtrack to any previously unlocked area. This seemingly small change makes a massive difference to me. Instead of this being a linear, chapter-based horror game, it now has that classic survival horror tone. It really gives the Ishimura,
The USG Ishimura,
a Spencer Mansion vibe. Now let's talk about the bugs for a second. Thankfully, I've encountered very few of them. A few times I found a necromorph just standing there waiting for me to blow his limbs off. Not a huge deal, but it did break the tension a bit. The game did crash on me once, but I was able to load up an autosave and I only lost a couple of minutes. There was this one really weird bug that happened where I had died, but I think I activated a medkit at the exact same time, so the game was glitched. And even though Isaac was laying there lifeless on the ground, I could still shoot, reload, activate medkits and everything. It was actually really funny and had me laughing my ass off directly after being pissed that I died. I had to go to the main menu and load an autosave to fix it. Something similar to the last bug happened while on my New Game Plus run, where after being dragged by one of the tentacles where you have to shoot the weak spots to free yourself, Isaac just froze in place. I could basically do everything except for move. I had to quit to the main menu again and then reload the autosave to fix it as well. Now, none of these are game breaking by any means, just some small annoyances and a mostly smooth experience. Now, being the achievement and trophy junkie that I am, I feel obligated to talk about the differences between the lists on DSR and the original. They actually share a good chunk of them and they're very similar, such as completing each chapter, getting 30 kills with each gun and the like. And yes, the one gun achievement where you have to complete the game using only the plasma cutter is back, which is really cool. However, there are some new ones for completing the new side quests and also for beating New Game Plus and unlocking the secret ending, which I'm really excited to see. None of them seem to be much harder or that crazy to get than the ones from the original, with the exception of beating the game on impossible mode. In DSR, impossible mode is almost like a permadeath mode on hard difficulty, meaning that if you die, you either have to start an entire new game on impossible, start your run all the way over, or continue from where you died, but on hard mode. Basically, you won't get the achievement that way, which means to unlock it, you will need to beat the entire game without dying while playing on a difficulty mode that's similar to hard. It will definitely be a fun challenge trying to get that one, honestly. At the time of making this video, I had just finished my first playthrough of DSR on hard mode, which took about 13 hours roughly, and I instantly started a New Game Plus so I could start going for the achievements. And I can confidently say that at its very worst, DSR is on par with the original Dead Space. But for the vast majority of the game, it is much, much better, which is why I said at the beginning that this is the definitive way to experience Dead Space. So it may not have needed a remake per se, but damn, did they do a great job making one. And I am so, so happy that they did. And I highly recommend that you play this game. Now, let me know what you all think of the Dead Space remake. Have you played it? Are you going to play it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? I would love to hear what you all think in the comments below. I also want to thank you all for taking the time to watch this video, and if you could do me a solid, just leave it a like and subscribe to the channel. That would be amazing. Until next time, everyone, this has been the Gaspless, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Once was a ship from the CEC, the Ishimura USG. She cracked and boom with gravity. Go me, bully boys, go. Ha! Soon may the Callion come to save our souls and take us home. One day when the fixing is done, we'll take our leave and go. 3 score years she served her tour. 30 planets cracked and poor. The captain called no fly and swore he'd take that marker in tow. Ha! Soon may the Callion come to save our souls and take us home. One day when the fixing is done, we'll take our leave and go. La da 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 da. Before the ship could set on home, tragedy struck and the colonies are gone. The old red marker done them wrong and brought the miners low. Huh! Soon may the Callion come to save our souls and take us home. One day when the fixing is done, we'll take our leave and go. The ghouls aboard a mystery spoke of immutology. The captain swore he'd keep his creed and drag his crew down so. Ha! Soon may the Callion come to save our souls and take us home. One day when the fixing is done, we'll take our leave and go.